They have a group there, mate. Is there a cow? Oh, yeah.
Those of you who know me will be surprised to learn that I was properly brought up. And my father always told me, never refer to a lady's age. Well, I think we can make an exception today because Locomotive 106 is having a birthday. It's 110 years old, and I think that deserves a round of applause. Now, there are two types of history. There are factual history and there is story history. And I think I'll start with a bit of factual history for those amongst you who sniff chimneys and count rivets. That locomotive was built in Toowoomba in 1914 and went into service in 1915 on Anzac Day, which is quite a thought because Anzac Day didn't actually exist at that time. She was one of 15 locomotives that were built at the foundry here in Toowoomba. And when I tell children about the foundry in Toowoomba, I say to them, well, it's where Bunnings is now. And one little boy said to me, can you still buy steam engines at Bunnings? I said, no. It was decommissioned from QR in 1964. And I looked up May 1964 when she was decommissioned, and top of the hit parade were the Beatles, of course, at that stage. So that gives you some idea of how long she's been out of service with QR. But in 1998, as a result of a meeting between John Peel and Vic O'Rourke, who was then the president of the commissioner, I should say, for Queensland Rail, it was decided that that locomotive should come back to Toowoomba. And our very own Ross Scottley was absolutely central to that happening. And so it arrived back in Toowoomba. It was taken out to Lionel Moors, where it was, I think the modern term is deconstructed. And it was then brought into our shed here, and a number of our splendid volunteers went around scratching their heads, wondering how on earth to put it all back together again. Well, fortunately, Andrew Caldwell arrived in 2014, and since that time he has led our splendid team of volunteers, and they have completely restored that locomotive, which is standing so proudly there at the end of the platform. It's actually painted green because one of the locomotives in that class, of which there were 152 by the way, one of the locomotives in that class was painted green, and that was the one that used to take the Sydney Mail. Since that time when Andrew joined us, we were doing well, but we ran out of money. And one day, Clive, at the behest of Roz and myself, came and he said, "Why haven't you finished this thing?" And I said, "Well, we haven't got any money." And he also made a wonderful remark, which was, he said, "You know, we used to be able to build these bloody things." And he said, "Now we can't even make a wheelbarrow. How much do you want?" He gave us some money, and we were able to complete the locomotive, and she went into steam at the end of 2023. And it's been a fantastic achievement. So I would ask you all, please, the locomotive is 106, and I'd like you to use that name, but she's actually officially known as the Pride of Toowoomba. And it's taken us about 24 years to go from an empty site to a functioning tourist railway. And that's largely due to the work of the volunteers. And one of those volunteers is a lady that's almost in front of me, Kerry. And Kerry and her team are responsible for all this marvellous bunting and the cakes and the general festive atmosphere that they've created. So thank you very much, Kerry.
Now, we're not getting married yet. We're not getting married.
Roz has just said they're not getting married.
We'll distribute this after the train returns.
You get your piece of cake after the train returns. If it does return, it might stay in Wyreema. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been great sports and entered into the spirit of today. We hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Go do something.
Ollie.
Hello.
I need the gate key.
You point to right. That little loco 2 years ago pulled 2 rides and easels through the track next to its head. That's your loco. 106.2 horizon 16 through this other track.
Hey, take care.